We've been talking about consciousness, and we've been looking at it from a couple of different perspectives. Uh, we've talked about that other perspective, that one that is a little bit out of reach. I'd like to go there with you if we could. First of all, I'd just like to share a couple of little stories that have impressed me lately. One of the things that has happened in my recent world, about the last year, I have been serving in this dual capacity of president here in the U.S. as well as internationally. What that has meant, among other things, is that I've got to know a lot of airports a lot better than I would like to. That's part of what happens. But part of this whole traveling that has been part of this position, when you travel, you find yourself very often in the presence of people that otherwise you would have no reason to ever encounter. You just wouldn't be in each other's presence. But I had a recent trip. I was going to India, and 4 different impactful sorts of conversations took place on this one trip. And the first occurred waiting in line here at the airport at O'Hare. You're always waiting. Young woman, just flown in from Hawaii, was on the same plane I was on, going to Frankfurt, Germany. Turns out she works 2 jobs, so she was commuting. Her one job was in Hawaii in an experimental school. Her other job was as a pastry chef in Frankfurt, Germany. And an odd combination, but this woman was she was a young lady, and she was so inspired and so grateful for the life that she had that put her in these 2, these 2 different communities. And she was commenting on how she felt like she's an old soul, and what she gets out of it is the connections that she's able to make in these various places around the world. That was one conversation. Quite uplifting for me. Second one, another woman, run into her on the plane, and she's, turns out as we talk, she's several years younger than me, but she grew up in the exact same neighborhood I did in New York City. Went to one of the schools that we used to always just beat when we played basketball. So I was very proud of that. And her work was now taking her to Chennai, India, where she was going to build teams of individuals to function in the corporate world. She was a team builder professionally, which I didn't even know that job existed. But this was what she was doing. The third conversation, probably the best, was with a woman who was my seatmate on the airplane. When I came up to my seat, this wonderful face smiled at me, looked me in the eye, motioned. This was my seat next to her. When you looked at her, she wasn't someone who had just stepped off the streets of Chicago. That was clear. Turns out she was an older lady from some little tribal village in Algeria. Didn't speak a word of English. But she just started talking to me a mile a minute. Just talking, motioning to the seat, having me sit. And at first, I felt a little bit of an impasse between us, because she'd say something which I clearly didn't understand, and I'd respond, and she didn't understand. But it didn't take long for us to get over that. And in no time flat, for about the next half hour straight, we had the most wonderful conversation. And during the conversation, she would say something, and then she'd touch my face. The stewardess, the flight attendant came. This woman was not a frequent flyer at all. This was the first time she'd been on a plane. And she didn't know anything about the seatbelt. I'm showing her how to adjust the seatbelt. Told her about my wife, told her about my daughter, and she would nod and tell me about something. And I would nod. But it was this feeling so uplifting. This woman was someone whose kindness, whose gentleness, whose tenderness just spread out from her. And I was fortunate enough to be the one enveloped by it in this particular trip. 3 conversations. The fourth one, and the one that probably might take me into something to talk about consciousness. I had gone to India, and one of the things I was doing, there was a gentleman there, we've become co-workers. I had known he was a very well-regarded architect, and he's going to be helping us with a number of things at our campus in Chennai, India. We're sitting down at breakfast, and we're having a conversation, and someone is doing the usual sort of thing about woe is us. You know, look at all of the things that we're doing to the environment, the degradation that's taking place. You know, the list that we all know of the various ways that we are impacting our environment and the necessary sorts of effects that are going to come from this. And she was going on this trend. A couple of people there kind of nodding. And then she gets to the point of saying, well, and imagine where we'll be 20 years from now. And my friend, the architect, his immediate response, and it wasn't one of these responses where he was trying to hijack the conversation onto a more positive line. It was just the immediate, natural expression of his consciousness was that, yeah, you're right, 20 years, things will be so much better. And I found myself sort of sitting back thinking, I was getting carried along with this woe is us line. And then he went on to say, because of course, the sorts of practices that we're putting into place now, 20 years from now, it's going to be so much better. Such a shift. Such a difference in looking at the exact same world. So anyway, what I'd like to talk about a little is this. What comes out of those 4 basic little vignettes is the recognition that came to me that every single moment, in every interaction that we have, impressions are being passed between us. We don't even think of it that way. But we meet, we impress, we sit in someone's presence, and we are impressed. And there's a process that's involved in that. One of the comments that has been made, great writer, didn't have a long life, Flannery O'Connor, made the comment that mystery is the embarrassment of the modern mind. The thought that there is something beyond the capacity of our thought is an embarrassment to the modern mind, even though it's a fact. And it's the basis of any sort of reach and extension of consciousness. So what is that lies beyond? One of the things that has been coming to me quite a bit here lately, and I find myself kind of repeating it, sometimes you don't want to get to be a broken record, but because all of you are hearing me for the first time, you'll think this is new. But here's an idea. In the world today, you all probably have TV sets, so I don't need to tell you. You turn on the news and there's growing deserts in the world, there's problems with water for the world's population, there's any number of wars, there's hunger, there's environmental degradation, there's all of that stuff. We know the list. It's all out there. These are issues that are facing us that are the substance of what we're going to have to address. Our children demand no less. I used to hear these sorts of things and I would think, oh, that's terrible, what the world is coming to. My poor daughter, the world she's going to inherit. I just feel so sorry for her and the children like that. Of course, over time, the various scientists that were tracking this problem were able to improve their models. And as a result, the time frames changed to the point where they're saying, Tim, no, it's not going to be after you're dead and gone. These are things that are going to be making their presence known during my lifetime, during your lifetime. So it got to be a little bit more immediate. But what occurs to me is this, and I'll share it with you. You can think it over for yourself, decide if it's true or not. Every single problem that we're facing, whether you think about spreading deserts, whether you think about pollution of the air, the water, the earth, the various sorts of imbalances in economies that create poverties that don't necessarily need to exist, all of the range of issues and problems that Cassie was talking about earlier. Every single one of those, there is knowledge that exists now. We need no new theory. We need no new technology to address every single one of these things that are facing us at the moment. That's the bald-faced fact of it. Which leads me to ask the question of, if that is true, then why are they not being addressed? Why? And that's the tougher question, because then we're moved to this whole area of consciousness. First of all, it becomes clear to me that in a situation where all variety of knowledge could be applied to these problems and create solutions very quickly, it becomes quite clear to me that knowledge in and of itself is not sufficient. We know, but there's another step to this thing that seems to be missing from this process. Knowledge will take us so far. It's a fuel, but it needs to be ignited. So, what is that next step? What is that something that is, in fact, of the nature of consciousness that is required for this moment? So that's why I start thinking along this line. To me, it's clear that if, in fact, the solutions to the sorts of issues that we're facing require the expertise of others, we're in trouble. There's this Zen expression that to the mind of the expert, there are few options. To the beginner's mind, there are countless options. The flexibility, the openness of the beginner's mind is the mind that is the hope, not of the future, but of the present. So, if it requires the input from something that is external to us, well, then we're in trouble. But the fact of the matter is that it does not. That every resource required to apply to all of these various issues in life are in fact resident within us, but remain dormant. So to me, the process that is of utmost importance, and the beauty of it is the process that is something that is completely familiar and available to each and every one of us, is this matter of developing the means to connect or to reconnect or to remember our connection with a deeper level of consciousness. And the term for it to me is very simple. We need to learn, once again, how to be inspired. What it means for us to be inspired. It's one of the most simple things in life. We watch little children do it from the moment they hit the ground running. And somewhere along the line, we forget it, that the basis for every creative inspiration comes from this act of being inspired. And so, I put this forward just really to remind ourselves. Joseph Campbell gave this wonderful piece of advice that really has also been probably the source of more unemployment among New Age and spiritual sorts of people. Follow your bliss. I think more people have been unemployed from that than anything that there is out there. Not because it's not true. It is true. But it doesn't mean, find that thing that you really like and forget your family and your job and all the other things that support you. But this idea that there are those things that we can mark in our own lives that bring us inspiration. Inspiration, just briefly described, is that sense of openness when we feel as if we are unobstructed to the flow of something else. That mysterious something else that ignites our thoughts about potentialities, that is the source and the basis of our connections, which we call connections of love with one another. It's there. And in these blissful moments, whether for you it's gardening, standing at your window watching a sunset, playing with your children, doing some little piece of art, listening to music while you're on the treadmill running. There are countless ways. Some people it's sitting and meditating. Some people it's saying prayer. But every one of us has an inroad to allow for this moment of openness that provides the inspiration, that feeds us, that connects us with each other and with this deeper source that we all share. So really that's the reason I'm here talking. We're talking about consciousness, is just simply to remind us. Each and every one of us has this power. Each and every one of us exercise it, but it's kind of random. It can become our daily, moment-to-moment practice. There's no reason for any one of us not to live a life that is characterized by inspiration. I have said, and I've said it because I actually believe it's true, that anyone who embarks on any sort of path that verges on this realm of spirituality necessarily becomes a healer. Because the consciousness that inhabits you is something that's very attractive to others. So that when you sit in their midst and you say nothing, just like my friend on the airplane, the little lady I haven't understood yet in terms of what she was saying, something spreads. And it spreads from you to the next, from the next to the next. And it's what makes this next step, that is the step that we're all moving toward, not just possible, but makes it so it can come quickly. That's the role that we're here to play. And to do anything less, I think we sell ourselves short and we sell others short as well. We all have something to give to this world. So, what you need to give is not what I have to give. It's unique. So I say that just to say, let's celebrate that in terms of consciousness, that's where we meet. And so to go from here today, acknowledging your own source of inspiration. So thank you.